I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? All right. Well, it's the Monday after Super Bowl Sunday. That's
Yes.
a big, big, big deal in the United States. Did you watch the game?
I did not. I did not. I didn't watch football for the longest time after the Kaepernick stuff and Black Lives Matter, but started watching it again a little bit with my partner because we like watching games together. But
Yeah.
But we decided that we were not going to give it our eyes last night. So I didn't get to
I
see it,
appreciate that.
but watch the halftime show on, thank goodness for YouTube. So
Okay. So you watched the halftime show. So I also will just acknowledge that I haven't been watching football in the same way that I've watched football in the past. When I was watching it in the past, it was because of friends were playing and things like that. So I was being supportive in that way. And then, I had family members that played football. So I enjoy the game when it's a good game. And I was on the island yesterday. Today I'm back in the US to take care of some business, but I was on the island and football is not a US football. I have to make that distinction because football is football soccer in Jamaica, but football, US football is not a very popular sport in Jamaica in the same way. So the folks that were watching it were probably mostly visitors to the islands. And I did go to meet up with some friends at Margaritaville and Montego Bay, and they had the game on the big screen, and people were wearing their game day clothes for the tourists who are coming in. But when talking to Jamaicans, are, hey, is anybody going to be watching the Super Bowl at their home? That was a no. And it was interesting also because I'm asking male identified people, and they're like, it's such a violent and aggressive sport. All they want to do is kill each other. And why would anybody want to reach that?
there you
It's
go.
funny responsiveness.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, it's just quintessentially American. That's what we do over there, trying to play
Modern
games,
day
trying to kill each
gladiators,
other.
right? Yeah, yeah. Modern day gladiators mixed with
Mhm.
plantation mentality. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So
But
there were so many things going into this game that I became aware of because I really wasn't paying attention to it until going to meet up with friends who were going to be out, and then kind of hearing that you have Kansas City, you have Eagles, you have the first time two quarterbacks who are American identified
mhm,
playing the game. So that is something historically that wasn't traditional for the
mhm,
NFL because the role of the quarterback is supposed to be somebody who's very strategic, who's very intentional about plays and all of that. And in the past, that was not attributed to people who were non-white. And so like that's why that's become a big deal. And then of course you have Kansas and Philly and all of the history on that. So those are some things going in. And then of course the Super Bowl is halftime show is a big part of watching. So one of the things I'm always going to watch Super Bowl for commercials, which are at $8 million this time, $8 million for to have a Super Bowl commercial going.
capitalism won't
Um,
buck.
yeah, it's bananas. And then the halftime show. So commercials and halftime show are for folks who don't traditionally watch US football and they want to watch the game to see what the new commercials are and see who's performing at the halftime show and what thing happens during that performance.
Yeah.
So this year there was Kendrick Lamar, who has a very strong history in rap hip hop, uh, being someone from Los Angeles who talks about real storytelling of urban life and communities and things like that. But controversially and also with a very social justice edge. So it was very interesting that he was chosen, especially because because it's in New Orleans, and New Orleans is known for its hype and its music, and it has a number of phenomenal entertainers that have come out of the city, and they didn't choose someone to represent New Orleans in New Orleans. So I know that there was like some underlying unhappiness with that.
they did for
Say?
the national anthem. Jean
Yes,
Baptiste sang the national
John
anthem, so
Baptiste,
he's definitely a New Orleans.
native.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
man.
So
Yeah. And has the rhythm of the music. And I was glad that John Baptiste did it, and I had to watch it because I missed the opening part of it. But he's also the gentleman who does Freedom, the song Freedom for folks who don't know. And in that song is very traditional about like New Orleans style and traditions and customs, with the second line and the energy of the space. So it was great that John Baptiste was there. I know that there was chatter and folks that wanted to see that same level of representation happening during the Super Bowl halftime show because it wasn't like a Lil Wayne or somebody else from that space. I know it was Lil Wayne that was really, I heard that he cried. I don't know if that's true, but cried when he found out that he wasn't going to be the person being able to do the halftime show representing his city, which quintessentially would have been what we expected. And it's not only, hip hop artists that do the halftime show, but some of us would have been looking forward to seeing New Orleans come out as New Orleans, like as hard as they could represent.
yeah, and then the other
So,
performance that I shared on Instagram that was amazing was Lettucey, I believe.
mm,
Lift
love
Every
Lettucey.
Voice thing, which was just stunning. She did an amazing job.
So no one, I missed that too. So Lettucey did the Black National Anthem at
Yes,
the beginning of.
they started doing that before the Super Bowl, back during Black Lives Matter, and so of course I didn't watch it in real time last night. So
Yeah.
I was scrolling YouTube, looking at things, and I saw on Instagram somebody had posted that she sang. So I went and found and I shared it and remixed it on Instagram. The whole song was just, yeah, just blew me away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just we have to give some context about the Black National Anthem is the that's exactly what it's named, the Black National Anthem. It is an anthem that is speaks to the language of like lift every voice and sing,
Mhm.
and it is a way for folks with a history of being African American in the United States, having an anthem that matches more than our national anthem, because our national anthem really is about destruction and violence, if
Like,
you're listening to and analyzing and studying the words,
yeah,
whereas the Black National Anthem is really about unifying and uplifting the voices and the struggle of African Americans
yeah.
in the United States. So I'm glad to hear that that's a part of what has been contributed to the games because that really does give a larger, stronger context of like what American culture can look like to the exclusion. And let's name all of the other folks that are in the United States and I'm not sure if other communities have national anthems, but it does speak to the history of like the development of the United States that there is a known Black national anthem, that there is our national anthem, that these things are shared with a game that is quintessentially American made and shared across the world. So,
She did an amazing
um,
job. So
lots to talk about
yeah, yeah,
around this game.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And the history of course, the Kansas City Chiefs they still have their logo as they never changed their name, as the Washington Commanders, their previous name, not going to say it out loud, changed to the Commanders to change that indigenous slur that they used as their name. So the Chiefs have refused to change that, and they still do the song with the tomahawk chop is their thing that their fans do, and which drives me nuts every time. And the owners of the Chiefs are very MAGA, very Trump friendly. And of course, he was the first sitting president to ever attend the Super Bowl. He was there last night and left in the third quarter. I understand because his team wasn't winning, so he left. But so yeah, and then the Philadelphia Eagles, for folks that don't know, when they won the Super Bowl back when Trump 1.0, when Trump was in office the last time, they snubbed him. They refused to come to the White House, which is typical for the winner of the game to take a trip to the White House, and they refused to go. So my guess is they will refuse to go again this year. So in a lot of ways, them winning last night was lovely, even though the game in and of itself is fraught with lots of issues. You know, if one of the teams had to win, I'm glad it was the Eagles.
People were asking who I was rooting for, and I was like, I hadn't even been enough of a fan watching to have an idea or a care
Yeah.
about who was winning. And I was really surprised about kind of all of the what I'm going to attribute symbolism to that happened around the game. So, to your point of President Trump attending the Super Bowl, that's unusual. That that they had the national anthem. I don't know. You weren't watching live, and I watched all the way up through the halftime. But the commercials this year, which I thought were really fascinating,
Mm.
were mostly steeped in like going back, like so like commercials of the past that they kind of have and they've made more current, recent, but it's definitely like the old Pringles commercial when
Oh,
the mustache would fly off of, like when you ate Pringles and the mustache would fly off. They had a kind of vignette to that. They had when Harry met Sally, there was like a thing to that. The old commercials where
they went retro.
you
They were.
they went retro. That's what I wanted. Thank you for that language. They went retro. They
Mm.
went back to this time period, this glorified time period in all of the commercials, which I thought was, if you're paying attention to how things are going, I thought that was really symbolic and very interesting. And there was a shift on that because where like the little dots that go across the thing would have been like a little pink faced thing with blonde hair and blue eyes. It
Okay.
was a brown faced thing with brown hair and blue eyes. So it's not a pink thing.
Oh,
So it was very interesting that the throwback had a lot more marginalized community attributed to being the face of it rather than white identified community. So I was noticing those type of differences in the game. And then, of course, Kendrick Lamar being the choice for the halftime and all of the interesting things that happened during that we'll
SZA. You
be
can't
able
forget
to get
SZA
into.
was
And
in.
SZA, yes, showing up.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, so like there's some interesting things about that's happening. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting in my timeline, I've been just looking at Instagram and Facebook and listening to what people post about it. And Allie Henny, who I follow on I think both platforms, she's a black woman content creator, and I'm sure I'm abbreviating greatly her bio, but I follow her, really appreciate her teachings and the wisdom that she brings to things. And she made a post that said, if you didn't understand the halftime show, just understand that that doesn't mean it was bad. It means you were not the target audience. And I thought that was brilliant because
Interesting.
I've had quite a few people that look like me as a white identified woman being on the platforms today going, well, I didn't like it and I didn't get it. And, I can't understand any of the words and all of that. So I thought that was interesting, that concept of, if you don't get it, it means maybe you weren't the
For
target
you.
audience. And that, we've talked before about how whiteness doesn't understand how to live in discomfort or how to live in a space that's not built for our comfort. And that halftime show was not built for our comfort. And so I thought that was, I just thought that was an interesting take on it, that really resonated with me. So.
Having watched it, I'm curious as if it was uncomfortable for you at all watching the halftime show.
No, no, I thought it was amazing. I mean, it, I do sometimes have a hard time understanding and following the lyrics, so I didn't. There were things that I didn't get, but it's not because he's a horrible rapper. I mean, it was brilliantly done. It was brilliantly
Mhm.
constructed and conceived, and Samuel L. Jackson is, flawless in his role, and yeah, all of it. Serena Williams and her cameo, and yeah, didn't make me. And then of course the dancer that pulled out the Palestinian and Sudanese flag and ran with it as long as he could until he got tackled by I don't know if they were Secret Service or
Security.
security or what they were, but so he's now the hero of the hour to get that
Mm.
on such an international platform. So it made me uncomfortable at all, but I totally get the whiteness that did feel discomfort by it, and so
So I can say that I was bored. I was bored compared to other halftime shows for sure.
okay.
Um, According to your friend, I wouldn't be the target market either for what for the halftime show. For me, it was like again, back to the symbolism.
Yeah,
Samuel L. Jackson dressed up in Uncle Sam-esque American flag-esque stuff and
right.
saying, "I am Uncle Sam now."
Mm,
Right. So like giving a different image, like that's how he was introduced to everyone, giving this different image of like kind of this white man with the beard pointing at everyone. He's
right.
kind of more like this Sambo, happy figure saying that I'm Uncle Sam. So that was a little bit like, huh? What is he doing? And then the commentary throughout the whole piece, like he was making references, was like, that's a little too urban, too ghetto. And I know that there was like a play on narratives that surround urban non-white communities. And so I was interested, I found it curious, a little bit weird, that that was the choice, but it also definitely makes sense for Kendrick Lamar's music and the way that he communicates narrative storytelling about the urban experience. So I
Well,
understood the juxtaposition there, but if someone didn't understand that to the person that you refer to's point,
yeah.
there could be a confusion. And I was watching the game with a very quintessentially white a person of Jewish faith, male person who was there with us in Jamaica, who's been there for a very long time. And there was a moment when I was commenting of this is boring, and he and he said, "Well, can you imagine what this means for white people?" Because he talks like that. So it was like, oh, I mean, maybe I didn't understand like that they started out like kind of on a tic-tac-toe thing, and then the color coordination of the dancers switched different types of flags. So I saw the American flag, but I kind of feel like I saw the black and white symbol of the flag, and I maybe think that I saw blue and white, Blue Lives Matter type of symbolism. I was like, that's what it was looking like. Um, and yeah, so that's some of the things that it was looking like, but it focused on Kendrick Lamar in a way that you couldn't see all of like the larger
Hmm.
movement, that they create imagery.
Well, I did
And
read.
yes, unless you know his music, you don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I did read that the stage when you saw the X and the O, which I think is what you're referring to with the tic-tac-toe, that if you kind of zoomed out and looked at it, that it was supposed to be like a PlayStation controller.
Hey, okay, okay, okay.
Sony, which Drake is on Sony's label, so there was a nod to all of that with
Got you.
regard to that, and then Serena Williams cameo. And please understand, I didn't get any of this in the moment. I have
Hmm, hmm.
breakdowns on what all the different symbolism meant. So none of this is original thought from my white brain. But Serena Williams, when she came out and did her cameo, was standing right in the middle of the X because she used to date Drake, and or at least they had a thing
Ah,
disrespected her, and so that was kind of the bend from her end to
huh.
come in and do the cameo. I think Samuel L. Jackson, I read, and his delivery reminded me of it, and then I read that it was a nod to the character that he played in Django Unchained, where he was,
Yes,
um,
definitely. That's what I'm saying. Like that kind of like
yeah, yeah, it had that
Uncle
whole,
Tom Sambo-y
right, that
thing.
whole, you know,
Hmm.
and at one point he was like, "You don't know how to play the game," and so he was. I got the sense that he was coming with a voice, kind of like if he could channel the whiteness that would be questioning what Kendrick was doing through his own, lens. That was the role he was playing in that space, and so
No,
yeah,
he definitely was playing Sambo, talking to
right,
walking white people through the process.
right.
So like if everybody missed that he was in theater, he was the chorus or
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah. Like
moderator
Shakespeare.
helping you,
Yeah,
yeah, like a
yeah.
Shakespearean chorus, like helping you walk through what was
Understand
going on.
what we were saying.
Um,
Yeah, Yeah.
and you using a very white lens to do it because he's, saying things like, "Ooh, that's urban. Oh, you brought all your homeboys with you." Like
Right.
the little things that he was saying was definitely the narrative
Mhm,
about Black people and Black culture.
mhm.
So if you're studious in the way that you want to dissect it, it would be to listen to what Samuel was saying, see the visual of what was happening on the screen, and then hear the language of what Kendrick is talking about in that moment, because it's
Right.
probably going to relate to some type of harm that has occurred
Mhm,
towards and for the Black
mhm.
identified or urban community of some sort.
And then the
So,
choice of They Not Like Us. I mean, that was obviously a nod to, his beef with Drake, but also, you know,
mm,
just that juxtaposition of who he was talking to, and the fact that there was not one white person in the entire production, which I
mhm,
appreciate
mhm,
and appreciated, and then the symbolism of the American flag with the gap in between. I was
mhm,
reading someone saying that symbolized the division between the country,
mhm,
between
mhm.
the country, right?
Inside the country, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was I thought it was beautifully done for the moment and the audience and the platform and the reach that it had.
Mm,
I was appreciative that it felt like he crammed in as much messages as he could throughout the whole thing. And then at the
mm.
end, turn off your television, turn off your TV, turn off your
Turn
TV.
off your TV. So, and that's the thing, like, I don't know Kendrick's music
Hmm.
that well to know if that was a part of the lyrics, but I heard that distinctly. Now,
Hmm.
turn off your TVs, turn off your TVs. And what that would be a dog whistle for is stop supporting
Yes.
all of this harm and violence
Yes.
to our nation, not to a specific demographic of people, but like if we're really talking about it, and if you're listening to like this harm and violence, if we're talking about the separation, if we're talking about the history of harm from the United States, if we're talking about the violence that has occurred to specific communities and demographics, and that is quintessentially represented in American football, this very aggressive, very violent,
Gladiator.
competitive
Yeah.
game of play that is like intentional to hurt people, not to make goals, but to like put people down, to sack them, to like take control, power, dominion. That is what we do support as a nation that was being called into question through this halftime show. And when Kendrick first opened up the mic, he was like, they they might have chose the wrong one to do this.
Yeah.
Like he kind of like said it even, but you had to catch it. You had to know what it was to understand it, or you would have just watched, somebody that you don't really understand the lyrics of what he's saying, and then seeing a whole bunch of movement that would not have resonated with you in any type of way. And I really was very bored. I don't know if I was the target demographic, my aged Black identified female person. I don't know if I was the target demographic. However, there was lots of messaging, but there was lots of messaging in all of the things. I heard that what were they not allowed to do? Oh, that I heard that the uniforms and everything, if you had anything like end racism or anything like that that used to be like on the helmets or on their jerseys, all of that had to be removed. And
Really?
it
Oh, I'm sure
completely,
that's
they had
considered
to get
PI. Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
new helmets and and jerseys and all of that kind of stuff, because anything that was at all relating to racism could not be visually there, which also speaks to censorship in the United States, right? Censorship in a way, if you can't have something like end racism. They did have that commercial that continued to play, and with Snoop Dogg, and I can't remember the other entertainer actor person, but they were doing a play on this video that came out where it was a Black person talking to a white person, and they were talking about the things that they hate about each other, but then it turned out that there was a similarity, and it ended up with like loving each other and hugging each other because they had talked it out. And so this commercial with Snoop Dogg and this other actor was playing on that, and it was like, I hate the fact that we even have to make this commercial because there's so much, hate in the United States. So, and that commercial played over and over, kind of like when they do like the NFL Cares
thing.
thing. And then the YMCA, there was a commercial of young people that continued to run through the relationship with the Boys and Girls Club YMCA.
Okay.
And it was speaking to a little girl and young people reciting how and where they matter. They have different clothes, but I still matter. So it was like this
Nice.
kind of universal all
Mhm.
mattering thing, this very love hot type of
The
the
kumbaya moment.
commercials. This
Was it
kind of,
the
yeah, this like
kumbaya
very
moment?
kumbaya love pot. Like we're gonna skim over, you
Yeah.
know, the harm and the violence that might exist, and kind of force this ideology of, you know, there is separation, but look, we actually do love each other. Is the way that I was seeing
Okay,
all of the messaging
$1 billion just to put that message
happening.
out into the world. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, to
So
the point of the turn off your TV, it occurs to me, I would love to know if there was any measurement of ratings, whether or not people, because when I watched the recording on YouTube of the halftime show, because I didn't watch it live, he's saying turn off your TV, turn off your TV, turn off your TV when the show ends and everything goes dark. And I wonder how many people turn their TVs off at that point,
right,
whether or not they
yeah.
listen. I would love to, I wonder if there's a ratings thing or something that you can tell when people stop watching, if they actually followed the directions, as it were. But
Yeah. And
yeah.
I'm curious of like who would have picked that up because I heard it very distinctly and but I didn't know if that was a part of his lyric.
Mm. I
Do you
don't
know
know.
what I mean?
I don't know the lyrics well enough to say definitively if it is or it isn't.
Yeah,
It struck me
yeah.
as not. It struck me as new, but because I have heard the song before, but I haven't studied the lyrics enough to just say
Mm,
definitively. But yeah,
yeah.
I thought it was. If it was part of the lyrics originally, it was a beautiful moment to
Way to yeah, to
and
highlight it and say it
someone.
over and make sure people heard it.
Yeah. Well, it's like when when Lettucey sang "Lift of Your Voice and Sing." She sang the last verse. She sang it 3 times, and
Yeah,
the last chorus, "Let us march on till victory is won." She sang it
victory is won.
3 times, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it just total chills by the time
Yeah.
that was done. So yeah, I mean, football is the game of football is it's such a dichotomy, and especially around the Super Bowl because people make such a big deal out of the commercials and they want to see these feel good moments. And I'm not saying that the commercials aren't, well produced, but they had to pay $8 million to get it on there, and I don't want to give the NFL any kind of credence, that they can make up for the bullshit that they do by having one or two really, meaningful commercials. I mean, did I used to buy that? Absolutely. I used to love the commercials, and used to think, oh, that's great. But it just, the whole thing is just so fraught with capitalism and plantation mentality. And we watched, my partner and I were watching Hard Knocks one show, and it was about usually the show Hard Knocks follows a football team from preseason all the way through and getting ready for the football season. And they did one on during the draft, leading up to the draft
Mm.
and all that. And I couldn't watch it. I told my partner, I said, I can't. I said, you can watch this one, but I can't do it because they were talking about the players in such, it felt like the block.
A chattel way.
It
Yeah, man.
it felt like I was watching, the slave block, and it just,
Hmm.
it was horrible. It was like, well, is he gonna produce? Is he gonna give us the game that we want? And they're just talking about it as if they were commodities. I think that's what you
Yeah.
said. I was like, nope, I can't do it. So
It's really hard to watch when you are able to start making those like real connections, with like the structures of like how of ownership of over humans and
oh,
people.
even the
It
fact that
really becomes very difficult.
you know
Hmm.
none of that is, and that there are no black owners, that they have to get voted in by the club, and the club will never let them in.
Yeah,
So yeah,
not in a real way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
disgusting.
it's all
So
of the things. And
yeah,
I didn't want to skim over that as we were talking about that moment where Kendrick Lamar was saying, turn off your TVs, what you did not see live visually that you brought up earlier is that one of the dancers did have a flag and was able to jump off of a large platform onto like the main field and didn't get far on the field, but like in the area that they were able to run, they did. And they were flashing the Palestinian flag and got a couple of little reps around before security came. But you did not see that on any of the mainstream cameras. So you would
yeah,
only have known that that was happening if you were there in the stadium and or seeing it in the post production and all of the clips that have come out about the game.
yeah.
But the symbolism and the importance of that, especially during Kendrick Lamar's performance at the halftime, was I think really important to happen so that people know, so that as the globe is watching, that there's still folks that are thinking about and considering our family members across the waters in Palestine.
And Sudan. So it said
And
Palestine.
Sudan. Oh, so it was a Palestine and Sudanese because I couldn't.
I
I
believe
saw
it.
the clip and all I saw was the Palestinian side of it.
Right. I believe it was a
Okay.
Palestinian flag, and then it said Palestine at the in the red part, and then Sudan in the
Oh, lovely.
so trying to represent both. But yeah, and then Kendrick said in the beginning that the revolution will be televised, and so
Hmm.
I appreciated the courage of that person to sneak that flag in the middle of the dance, man. He picked a great moment, and yeah, and I have seen on the socials that he was released without charge. So,
Oh, good
but the NFL has banned him from all football, any
performances.
football related for the rest of his life. So I'm sure he's not upset about that.
No, not when we know that across the water people are
Yeah,
losing their lives, and
yeah.
this is so much more important. So yeah, we have the NFL and Super Bowl Sunday that had so much symbolism with like what is actually going on in U.S. territory as far as race relations, as far as capitalism, as far as symbolism, as far as like Uncle Sam imagery, as far as this very violent competition, having the South against the North, because Kansas is considered South, and New England, excuse me, and Philadelphia is up in our northeastern part of the states. So
Kansas
yeah, so there,
City being very MAGA following, and Philly being,
yes,
very not. And so, yeah,
yeah,
there was a
being
lot
worker
going
populated.
on.
There's so much that can be discussed. So glad that we had the opportunity to just like highlight some of the things that were coming to our minds. And then Philly smashed Kansas.
Oh,
That's the other part of it.
righteous.
Smashed them.
Right.
That was another part of like why the game was boring. There was no competition, and I'm not really sure what was going on in the camp on the Kansas bench. But they didn't seem to be prepared. But the South never, when it comes down to big wars,
Yeah. But we
South
can
is
spin
never
it.
really
We can
ready.
spin it to say that we won it. So,
Yeah.
so yeah. So, well, next week we're going to get into some DEI conversation, which
Yeah.
think is, you brought up how they're not allowed to have in racism or anything on the helmets anymore. And that is a direct relation to DEI being all things DEI being taken away and
Yeah.
taken out. So definitely those of our listeners and watchers, please stay tuned for next week, and we'll dive into
Yeah.
DEI a little bit and why we
Let's
should
talk
be.
about what DEI is happening. Yeah, I heard some wild things that government officials can't even send emails if it's relating to anything that could possibly be thought of as DEI. So it's important for us to deep dive into the impacts of that and looking forward to having that conversation.
Absolutely. See you
All
next
right.
week.
See you next week. Thanks.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time. As you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.